Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to Thinking Out Loud Live. I'm Ricardo Zulueta. I'm the host, and this show was made possible by Start Day One, which is a nonprofit foundation for mental health and suicide prevention. So the reason we do this show is because we have a slightly different approach in the way we help people. We try to have a more proactive approach because we've seen that a lot of organizations and society as a whole this has a more reactive approach where people are waiting for mental health issues and suicidal tendencies. And we believe that by being able to change your perspective beforehand, it just kind of allows us to help people a little bit more because any kind of prevention has to be proactive. And that's what we're doing with Start Day One. We called it Start Day One because that signifies that there's a day two, day three, day four, because people are very overwhelmed with how much they need to change, but really they just don't know where to start. And so when we give them that Start Day One and really change their perspective and inspire them, and that's what we're hoping to do on this show. And on this episode of Thinking Out Loud Live, we actually invite Michelle Anhang to discuss how mindfulness can really help you create emotional resilience. So she's a certified life coach. She specializes in supporting individuals and families living with mental health challenges, and especially helping them moving forward after a loss. And in addition to coaching, she's actually a motivational speaker too. She shares her story of becoming widowed at age 34. Her husband actually died by suicide. So she was really busy last month because of Suicide Awareness Month. And, she kind of navigated her way through stigma, shame, and just her own mental challenges. And so she just shares that with a lot of the people. Anyway, without further ado, I'd love to introduce you guys to Michelle. Hey,
Hi,
Michelle, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. Not too bad. Where are you calling from, by the way?
I'm in Toronto, Canada.
Oh, okay. Got her northern neighbor. Anyway, so
Yeah.
I kind of gave everyone a quick, intro for you, but I like when people hear direct from you. So could you just tell people a little bit about your past, how you even got into the mental health, life coaching, all this stuff, and basically what you're doing now? So yeah, go ahead.
Sure, happy to. So, as you mentioned, 14 years ago, I lost my husband by suicide. He had been diagnosed a couple of years earlier with bipolar disorder and a form of schizophrenia. And at that point, it takes a while for, once we get the diagnosis, for them to figure out what the correct treatment is, the right meds. Usually it's not just one, there's a cocktail and doses. So, he was going through all these different trials, trying different things out. Nothing seemed to be helping. And unfortunately, he was getting progressively worse and reached a point shortly after his 35th birthday where he lost hope and we lost him. And at that time, I was 34. Our kids were little; they were 7 and 4. And the family decided to say that he died in an accident. We lived in a community where mental illness was not talked about. Suicide is definitely not talked about. And it just seemed, because we hadn't talked about his mental health issues before, nobody knew. Suddenly now this, a death by suicide, how do you even explain that? And it just felt like there was a lot of explaining that had to happen. And so we just chose to go the route of, we're just going to say it's an accident. And so for about 10 years, a little more than 10 years, I lied to everybody about how my husband died. And, that, of course, had an impact on my mental health. I was already, while it wasn't diagnosed, I already was challenged with depression and some anxiety. And then this just made it so much worse. So here I am, suddenly an only parent, trying to figure things out, financially, just figure out life. Like, we had been married for 12 years. We got married pretty young. So just trying to navigate through life and then telling this huge lie. So I couldn't grieve a suicide, which is very different from grieving an accident. And so I became depressed because I just shoved all my emotions down and I didn't deal with things. And then my anxiety was even worse because I was always worrying that somebody might find out, that I might get, called out as a liar, that somebody might tell my kids by accident. There were so many different things that I was constantly worrying about. And, I was essentially living a lie for all those years. And, just reached a point where it got too hard. It was just too much weight to carry. And I had just reached a point where I knew I had to go back to therapy, and I knew that I had to change my life. So I did a lot of the healing work, and came to a point where I could finally tell my children, which I have to admit was probably the scariest thing I ever had to approach, was, because I was worried, what if they never speak to me again? What if,
Right.
all the different things that could go wrong.
Right.
But thankfully, they were amazing about it. They said they understood. And they wished they had known from the beginning, but they understood why I made the choice that I did. And from that point, I realized this, there's that idea of like, do we, is there meaning there, or do we create the meaning? And I'm not sure if like this happened to me for a reason, or I just found a reason to make it work. But I realized that I wanted to support people that are going through what I went through at the time, and give them what I know I needed and I didn't get. Which was, the support of knowing that you're not alone in this, help navigating the system, the mental health system, knowing what to ask for, knowing, that you're going to, sadly, whatever country we're in, there are going to be roadblocks, and that we really have to push our way through to get the help that we know we or our family members need. And help people develop a healthier mindset around their own mental health challenges. One of the biggest learnings for me was that it's, you can't rely on medication alone. Often we think, and I think we're told too that, okay, just, take this medication, you'll feel better. And we just think, okay, if I take the pills, I'll be fine. But it's not, the pills alone don't help us. And so mindset is a huge piece of it. And that's where the mindfulness work comes in as well. And so, yeah, I left the corporate world and started to do this work and never looked back.
Awesome. Well, thank you for all of that. So that's an experience, huh? When did that actually happen? The suicide incident?
The suicide was in 2006.
2006. Oh, okay. And then how old were your kids then?
They were 7 and 4.
Oh, wow. So
yeah,
that's pretty big.
Yeah.
So they didn't know until later, or?
Yeah. We told them. Wow. I mean, I justified the lie in my head that, because they were so little, and I was like, I don't understand how he did this. He never talked about it. Sometimes people will give warning signs. They might say like, oh, the world's a better place without me, or I want to die, or it would be easier. He never said anything. So this came out of nowhere, and it took me months to wrap my head around just how sick he was. And, even though I think on one level I knew like he was in psychosis at that point, like he was not himself, but I always worried that he might accidentally hurt himself or somebody else. I never thought it would be intentional. So how do I then explain this to my kids? And I didn't want them feeling, because, there's so many emotions that come with, grieving a suicide. There's guilt. We all wonder, like, from immediate family to friends to coworkers, we're always wondering, like, did I miss something? Is there something I could have done? I often hear like, oh, if I just called them back, we all put ourselves through that. And
why this, why that? Yeah. When you ask those questions, it's just like, and that's actually why we tell people, you don't have to not be so reactive, right? doesn't matter. Don't wait when you think there's a problem. It's like, be proactive. That's why you actually see the color teal on our thing, because it's an acronym we actually came up with that helps remind people what we need to give. And actually, it's what we need to get to help in prevention, which is your time, effort, attention, and love. And that's not something like, oh, wait, Michelle, you're not depressed yet? Oh, teal for later then. Like, you have to do teal now. Don't wait and go like, well, looks like he's still getting out of his room, so I guess my kid's okay. It's like, no, you provide teal now. Go to the park like right now. Like, why are you waiting when they do have problems? And I always associate it with exercise. It's like, you don't work out when you're 500 pounds. Like, you work out even when you're in your best shape, because you don't want to get to 500 pounds. And it's so much easier to do it now. And, I'm sure you're learning that a lot with coaching, and your experience probably helps so much because you kind of understand what they went through.
Yeah.
So do you deal a lot with the loss and all that stuff? What's the very first thing that you do with them?
So I have more of an organic way of looking at it, because I think every situation, every individual is different. So I like to, kind of meet the client, see where they're at. What do they need right now to, to comfort them, to help them feel safe. And then we come up with a plan for how I can serve them, and how, what kind of support they need. So it's very much customized, but essentially, it is working through very much self-care. That's number one, that everybody is going to be doing work on, whether it's your own mental health challenges or a family member. The self-care, the mindfulness, the mindset. And then there's some direction of just, helping people make decisions that are right for themselves or right for their family members. And I may help them find resources, but I won't say you should do this. But, I can give one example that came up recently with a client. Was their partner. Their partner was not in a good place, and it was clear that they needed to be in a treatment center.
Yeah, right.
And but their partner was resisting it, saying, no, I'm fine. So the work that I was doing was saying, like, helping them trust their intuition, trust themselves, and just get to the point of like, okay, forget what everyone else is saying, forget all the advice, because there's always so much noise. And it's like, okay, slow down. You're living with your partner. You know what they're like when they're healthy. Where, do you think that they are healthy now? And getting really clear so that they feel empowered in the decision that they're making.
Yeah, you're right. And it almost always, the thing that I learned is like, questions are so good because it always comes from them. It could be the same result. You could tell them exactly what they're saying, but if it comes from you, it just never works.
Yeah.
It has to come from you, right? It has to be your idea. And if you beat them to it, it could be the same exact result, and it's not gonna work because you told them to. Yeah. And what's funny is because the more accountable people become, the better. I've learned that when people, especially, it's anyone, and I always tell people, that's why I tell people that, it's impossible to live life to the fullest. Not even motivational speakers go through shit. Like, they're not invincible. It's a natural human response to be depressed. It's a result, right? Not the cause, but people are turning it into the cause. But, and that's big. And I have to tell them that, like, it's natural. Like, it's the thing you got to figure out is the cause. Because depression, anxiety, all that stuff is the result. Now, actually, it brings me to the point when you said medication. You can't do everything on medication and rely on that, because the medication, I'm not saying it doesn't affect you, but what I'm saying is that's only remedying the result. But it's not going to remedy the cause. That is something you have to do intentionally. It will not just go away and all of a sudden you're good. You're going to need to keep having medicine forever because you never took care of the cause. You're just taking care of the result. That's like if you get a cut or something. Yeah, you can put a Band-Aid. Don't not put a Band-Aid until you get the surgery or whatever, or don't take don't not take insulin when you have diabetes. Prevention is all about stop eating the sugar now and doing this so that you don't get diabetes. But I'm not saying don't take insulin when you're there, but no matter what, though, that's just a result. So we don't go around telling kids, hey, eat whatever you want. I know how to look for symptoms of diabetes, kind of like the way they talk about symptoms of depression, suicidal tendencies. And I'm like, why are you waiting for the symptoms? That is insanity. And so I'm glad that you kind of mentioned that, like you can't rely specifically on that. That's just like a quick remedy. That's just a Band-Aid to help you kind of like, hey, come back, come back. Let's straighten you out.
And it's very disempowering.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, exactly that. What you did was you took away the power of decision from a person and you took away their accountability. And that just made it worse.
Yeah. Well, so what I find is that often people are disempowered because they have this expectation that the medication will work all the time. And then it doesn't, and then they don't know what to do.
Too.
And so they think that the whole, the entire, whatever their mental health challenges is completely out of their control, and that they're at the mercy of the meds.
Right.
And, that's a piece of it, but it's only a piece.
That's so true, because now it makes them even feel more worse, because they thought like, well, this should work, and it's still not working. Now they think they're really messed up. And you know how I learned about the accountability thing? I was, again, it's one of those stories I tell my audience all the time. But this is how I found out about it. There was this kid, I was talking about my clothing line or whatever, and I was telling them that it always starts with a decision. No matter what, it always starts with a decision. And this kid just kind of came up to me and said like, hey, I like that you're, what you're saying and stuff, but it's not that easy. And I said, I never said it was easy, but that's where it starts. And he was like, yeah, but I don't know, this and that. I'm in rehab now and this and this and this. And I'm just like, yeah, doesn't matter. It always starts with a decision. He's like, yeah, but I'm like, oh my God. And then I was getting sick of it. So I said, listen, stop saying but. It always starts with a decision. Now, why can't you do that? So I backed up, and he was there just quiet. And I'm going, what are you doing? I didn't tell you this is the cure. I'm saying this is where it starts, and it has to start there, right? And he's just going through his database of excuses. And I'm going, what? I didn't tell him to run a marathon, read a book, or, like it's something you could do like this. But he couldn't do it. And then all of a sudden he just goes, you're right. You're right. I go, I know. You're welcome. Like you went to rehab. You went to rehab and you didn't even decide to get better. That's why you're still there. And people have to take more accountability in that. But when it really hit me that it was accountability, I went to another person. This is much later, right? And this lady goes up to me. I told her the same exact story and just letting them know, like, it's all about accountability, or not accountability, that it starts there. And then she was just like so aggravated. It's like, I don't know. It's different with everyone. I go, no, you have to start. That's like the first thing you have to do, no matter who you are. It's like, yeah, I don't know. And then just got so agitated. She left like pissed off. And I'm like, why would someone be that mad? Like, so you get analytical, right? Mm-hmm. And what I realized was like, as soon as she agreed with me, was as soon as she had to let go and be accountable for all of her situation. She could no longer use the excuses if she agreed with me. And I'm like, oh, you don't want the accountability. So they actually crutch on these things so that, because when you take it away, that they're accountable for it. Now, all of a sudden, once they know that, they can't blame. That means you can't blame anyone. And so that's when I realized, like, wow, that does happen all the time. And that's what I was telling before. It happens to everyone. It's anyone with a bad state of mind. It's like you just end up loving excuses and hating accountability. It always happens, right? No matter, and we all go through it. Like, it's not just.
I think it's conditioning. I think, I don't think people mean to be that way. I think
No.
that's the only way that they know how to be. And I know, in my particular situation, and there's a quote, and I always mess it up, and I apologize, Elizabeth Gilbert, but she says something about, I've never seen like a major transformation happen in anybody until they got tired of their own bullshit. And that's essentially her line. And it's so true.
Yeah.
Like, I know for me, that point came where I just realized every decision I was making in my life was around my shame. It was just like, okay, that's here, and now it's creating my world.
Yeah.
And I didn't know any better, because that was the lens that I was seeing it through seeing everything through the lens of shame.
Right.
But one day I just got tired of like, okay, I don't know what better is, but I know this is way too painful for me to continue doing. And I can't live the next half of my life, because, this happened around my 45th birthday. So, midlife crisis and all that. But, I'm just like, I've been in way too much pain.
Yeah.
I can't live the next half of my life like this. And I realize it's me, like, and that was the thing. Like, for me, it was, being in a job that I wasn't happy in, being in a relationship I wasn't happy in, just so many different things I was tolerating. And it was like looking at it and finally realizing and accepting that I'm the common denominator here. Like, it's me. And it's actually empowering to take ownership of that and say, like, okay, it's all me, because I can change me. I can't change anything or anybody else, but I have the power to change me. And that's when I started to do my work. So, and sometimes it has to get bad enough for somebody for them to get there. And I'm very, I'm really say to people, like, because sometimes they're too scared, and they just might have too much fear because they've been conditioned that way to actually make the change. Like, the change seems terrifying, and it's like, okay, well, we'll just wait, and when things get bad enough, call me back, because at some point I just can't do it. But you just have to get there, like you were saying earlier. Like, I can tell them that, like, guess what, it's so much better and easier on the other side. But if you're not ready to hear that message, you're just not. And I totally get that. Like, we're all on journeys.
Yeah. And exactly like what you just went through, right? It started with a decision. People have to understand, to get rid of these problems, it has to be intentional. It has to be deliberate. It has to be a decision. It always starts with a decision. And then all of a sudden things changes. Like, for me, like, once you know all this, and what happened to you, right? It's because you found like this new sense of purpose. Like, whoa, wait a minute, I'm too much pain. Like, this is not right. Like, this isn't life. So
my purpose was getting out of pain.
Right? You have like a purpose. Like, this isn't right. Like, and then all of a sudden you start looking at like what you should be, where you want to be, really. And it all starts with a decision. And from there, you start developing your purpose. And mostly once you get that purpose, to me, at least, this is what I teach people, is that, when you're doing this, it all starts with the purpose. And then from there, you have to figure out if your perspectives are in line with your purpose, because everything stems from perspective. I've tried to prove it wrong in some way. Like, everyone that I talk to, whether life coaches, reading a book, or movies, or anything else, all it does is change your perspective. They did nothing to you. They didn't give you a magic pill, absolutely nothing. All that switches is your perspective of things. That is it. And then from there, all of a sudden your decisions follow, because if your perspective is here, the decisions will follow this. But if your perspective is on this way, everything will follow. If you think that you're going to be a failure, you're never going to find someone and this and that, well, guess what? All your decisions follow it. But all of a sudden, there's this one time, maybe a speaker, maybe a book, something will change your perspective. That's when you start seeing things more differently. And that's where inspiration is very important, because inspiration is actually what tilts your perspective from one to the other. And motivation is actually meaningless before the decision. And, a lot of people don't really know the difference between inspirational and motivational. So it's purpose, inspiration, and then it's perspective. Once you change your perspective, you will not make a decision unless I change your perspective. Will not. Until I can change when you go, you're right, or some way, then you won't make the right decision, or at least that decision that follows the same purpose or whatever. Once you make the decision, it's the only time motivation is actually beneficial. That's where it's actually a byproduct. It's weird. Same thing with passion. People are like, oh, I'm just not passionate. Well, you got to do things, and then passion comes. It's not passion. Oh, you know what? I think I'm going to be a rock star. But I haven't even picked up an instrument. I don't even know how to sing. That's not how it works. You have to, it's actually built, from your confidence because of the things that you do, the decisions that you make. And once you keep doing that, your confidence goes up, your passion for it goes up. I believe all that is intentional,
Yeah, I believe you have to be committed to it. That's, you have to make the commitment.
Yeah.
And once you make the commitment, you don't have to necessarily know how you're going to get there.
Yep.
Because you can always find people that will help you with that. But that's what I think comes from inside. So yes, it's the perspective shift and then committing to do it in a certain way.
And actually, and that's what actually makes purpose so important, because when you don't start with that purpose, what purpose does is this. It's so funny. When we're trying to achieve different things or whatever, we always obviously go away from pain and go towards pleasure. That's just, if I ask you like, hey, what would you like to do? You're going to do the things like, oh, I hate doing this, but I love doing this. So I think this is what I want to do. Mm-hmm. But what purpose does is it doesn't matter whether it's painful or good, because it follows the purpose. People still have this idea that it's failure and win, right? They always think it's that way. It's just two completely separate lines. And people don't think it's one line. It's fail, fail, win, win, fail, fail, win. Mm-hmm. It doesn't go, it's kind of like, I used to wrestle or whatever. To get better, to be a state champ or whatever, you're telling me I can't lose, even in practice. You know what I mean? I got to get my ass kicked. If it's impossible for you to fail, it's actually impossible for you to learn. So people, you got to remember that whenever you fail, it's because it's you're learning something. If you didn't fail, that means you didn't really learn anything, right? And one of the things I'm telling people now is everything is just an assumption. You're a loser. Are you? Have you? Because of entrepreneurship wise, they always teach you everything is an assumption until you get feedback or data. So until you do that, and that's something I don't really see in the mental health field, is the learning part and getting the feedback from what you do, from your actions, from your decisions, and everything that that girl's not going to talk to me anyway. Did you just assume she's not going to talk to you for her? Why don't you find out? And then
I'm curious, where are you hoping to see it in the mental health field?
What do you mean?
Well, you were just saying, I don't see this in mental health about the assumptions.
Yeah, I don't really. So everyone kind of tells people what to do, right? Or shifting where they should go and stuff like that. But I feel like they're not really telling them, because I guess in the startup industry.
So would this be therapists?
Not really. It's just to actually evaluate afterwards, after implementing something, after doing something. And I don't really see a lot of so what did you learn from that, or kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? And really evaluating yourself, because in the startup scene, you don't know anything. You don't know what's going to work. Yeah. The people will tell you. The external factors will tell you. Everything you know is, oh, this is going to be a great company. Is it? Mm-hmm. Because that's why VCs don't even really look at business plans anymore, because they know it's almost useless. Everything that you wrote down, that's not what's going to happen. Guaranteed. Mm-hmm. It's not what's going to happen. Yeah. And they know. And same thing with people. It's I see them as little startups, everything you think you're going to accomplish,
Well, that's where you hire a mental health coach like me, because I actually do say, try out the tools, and then afterwards, the next session, talk about how did it work for you.
Well, I know from, with life coaching, so everyone's listening, if she's jiving with you, definitely check her out. I better put this thing up real quick here. I got to get your banner up.
But
so they know where to go. Yeah, but what the best thing about the coaching thing, at least from what I've seen, and is the accountability part.
Yeah.
You keep them accountable because someone's watching you. Like when you
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. So the accountability with me is really like it's up to the client, because sometimes
right,
they're not, and it's not my responsibility to keep anybody
exactly. You
accountable.
leave it
It's
at that.
their, and that's really a big piece of the work that I'm doing, and what I was speaking of before, of just the empowerment
Mhm.
of where, you may feel disempowered by taking meds. You can empower yourself so much, and like you were saying about with the choices that you're making,
Yeah,
and it's about like, I don't want anybody creating a dependence on me. I want them
yeah,
to be empowered to live their own life. Be with me
right,
for a period of time. I'll help you create a life that you feel really good about,
right.
with guidance, with accountability, but it's your life. So
Yeah,
if you don't do the homework, we
yeah,
might talk about why not, but
right,
it's, I'm doing my stuff and living my life. And then I just like, it might be a question of like, so what happens if you keep not doing it? Or where else are you not doing other homework, or being accountable, and just kind of exploring that. But
right,
essentially, I want to build people up. I want them to feel good about the choices that they're making,
right.
and daring to fail, and daring to
Yeah,
try things out. And I also say, like, I tell all my clients, like, in the beginning, I say, like, I will give you homework, I will give you tools and exercises to try, but
right,
don't try to be a good client and say, okay, knowing in your head there's no way in hell you're going to do that particular exercise. Like,
right.
and I say to them, like, it's a partnership. If you know you're not going to do that accountability or the homework, then tell me, like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's
I'd
not for me,
rather.
because I have a million things in my toolbox that I can pull out something else and say, how about that?
Right,
But
right,
that's a piece of empowerment too, of just, what, speak up to me and say, yeah, I'm so not going to do that.
right.
Like, I want to know, and I'm not judging. Great, you just stood up for
Yeah,
yourself, and you're
that's
telling me, and
great.
then that helps me be a better coach to my clients too, because then I know
That
what
makes
they want or they don't want. I say, if you tell me, okay, I'll do it, and you're not going to, I'm just going to keep giving you those types of homework that you're
right,
still not going to do. And then
right,
you're going to
right,
feel bad about it. And
right.
that's not why we're working together.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Again, it's like we go back, like it has to come from them. Like, I'm not gonna force you to do it. I don't have
Yeah.
to. That's not my job or anything else. So you actually just go, you just kind of hopefully it gets out of them. And that's your only job that what you have to do for them, right?
Yeah.
Now let's talk about like mindfulness. Can you define mindfulness to
Sure.
our audience?
Yeah. So mindfulness is essentially the awareness that comes from being fully present. So, like, really in the moment, and having a non-judgmental attitude towards it.
Mhm.
So, so often, we're either thinking about what we should be doing, or fearing things, or, like, oh, I need to be cooking dinner. What am I going to do? Oh, I don't have time to go to the grocery store. And we're all like, we're way in the future, or we're in the past. How many of us sit in the space of like, oh, in that conversation, I should have said this, and I can't believe they looked at me that way. And what does this mean? And I didn't do, and then giving ourselves a hard time about it. And so when we're doing that, we're not aware of what's happening in the here and now.
Yeah.
And so mindfulness is a skill that you can develop, where it's essentially, our brains, our brain is a muscle, and we can train it in any way. So this is training ourselves to continuously come back to the present moment, and not judge what's here. So it's really about like, okay, what am I noticing? What's happening with what's going on outside, and what's happening in my internal experience. So what are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What's happening in my body?
Mhm.
What is going on? So when we're in a mindfulness practice, or if we just incorporate mindfulness into our daily life, it's constantly returning to ourselves and checking in with ourselves, of
Right,
just like, okay, what's going on with me now?
right, right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the things, it's really kind of changed my mind a little bit. So I used to be I used to have that same thing, right? Like living in the present and stuff like that. But I started realizing more and more how important the future is. Not that you have to think about the future, but acting based on the future that you want.
Yes.
So a lot of people, when people are in really bad place, whether dealing with a loss, things like that, the biggest thing is not what they can see about their past, it's what they can't see in their future. Like when you're in a situation, it was like, fuck, what do I do? I didn't see a future without a husband. Like, well, like I'm not ready for this. And all you see is this, breaking up with even just a girlfriend. You know, I went through that, and she's like, you didn't see anything else beyond it. So it's like, it was so hard to shift that over. And that's the biggest thing. And so to me now, even with entrepreneurs, right? You know, they always think, oh, entrepreneurs, you don't have a boss. And I'm like, actually, you do. The future version of you is your boss. So whoever you're seeing, right? And that's why I related so much with like entrepreneurship, the startup. Like people, when they look at a business, they think of the future, right? Like how it's awesome it's going to be. And I have to just put that up real quick.
Thank you.
I just thought, I'm like, oh, I think I'll make Michelle.
Sending the love right back. Yeah, awesome.
But, you know, it's really all about the future version of you, right? So not that you shouldn't act in the present, but how does that future version of you want you to act in the present?
So yes to all of that. And I want to go back to what you were saying about the girlfriend that broke up with you, and you didn't see it in the future because you weren't in the present, because you probably were in the future or in the past and had your expectations rather than looking at like, what is this person saying to me right now? How are they acting right now? How am I feeling right now? So there's huge value in being present. 100%, you know, I mean, coaching is all about what are your future goals and working towards that. But the way to get there is by living every moment fully.
See, that's where, but if I had told you, or if I really knew that my future is going to be like, oh, I'm going to find the hottest girl, it's my high school crush, I wouldn't have even cried at all. Like I would have been totally fine. And it's because people get so bad because they don't see a future version of themselves. So in the present, because they can't see that, they act all messed up. But if I had told you like, oh, I saw your future, Michelle, you're going to be a millionaire. Like,
so I think we're talking about two different, yes, 100%, but mindfulness has its value in a different, like there's value in both. So, I mean,
definitely. Definitely. Like,
you know, like when it comes to mental health in particular, mindfulness is very helpful in the sense of noticing where am I right now? How am I feeling? What are my thoughts? So let's say if you have depression, you know, depression, there's a slope that we go down to when we're going into an episode. Sometimes we're not aware. And so, you know, and I'm bringing this up only from the sense of you can want that future self for you. You can have all of that. But if you don't notice in the moment that, oh, I'm slipping into an episode right now, and you don't take it right now, you're not helping yourself, and you're not helping yourself get closer to that future self. So the purpose that mindfulness has, particularly with mental health, is that, you know, so I'll speak from my own experience. So, you know, it's that mind-body connection, the connection to my thoughts, to my emotions, and what's happening in my body. I know my particular symptoms of depression are, I start feeling tired. And for me, I don't go into the down thoughts. I kind of shut off my emotions. Yeah. And so, you know, in the beginning, I used to not notice what was going on because my mind was somewhere else, either in the past or the future. Right. Now that I practice mindfulness, I notice like, oh, I feel tired today. I feel like I want to take a nap. I know that's a signal for depression. I'm also noticing at the same time that, you know, a movie that I watched yesterday that I would normally cry at because I'm a big crier, you know, I didn't cry. Oh, this is a signal to me that I might be going into an episode. Gotcha. And so now I do the self-care that I need to make sure that I don't slide all the way into a deep one, or if I'm sliding, that I'm taking care of myself and I'm adding the resources that I need to support me through this. So I might be calling a friend and saying, listen, I think I'm going into an episode, check in on me. I might make sure that I'm getting more sleep. I might take things off my calendar that I know are going to cause, that generally cause me more stress. Yeah. And then I'm adding in, maybe I'm letting myself nap every day. I'm carving out time. Right. And I'm being kind to myself. So self-compassion is a huge, huge piece of mindfulness.
Yeah.
And so it's really being in those moments, and doing that then serves my future self. Because my future self does not want me, pushing myself and grinding and all of that stuff, because like the hustle and all of that, we need to get over it.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of where I was going to. Like, being able to see a future version is almost initial, because if you can't see that at all, you're going to have a hard time dealing with your present self, like completely hard time. And all it is because you'll never change your perspective. If your perspective is your future, you're going to be down. You will never, ever get out. Ever.
I think you can. I think you don't have to have the future self. I'm going to respectfully disagree.
Yeah, but no matter what, it depends on your perspective. It's always going to be your perspective of it, right?
And I feel that when we tell ourselves that we have to have that future self, then we're being hard on ourselves. And again, that goes back to mindfulness, which is very much about no judgment, no self-compassion. Right. Yeah. And so I think, as we're developing a practice like that, to say like, okay, it's okay. I don't know what future me looks like. And when I started the work that I did, like my healing work, I had no idea what a good life meant, because I had never lived one. I had childhood stuff. Like, I didn't know what I want. I just knew right now I'm committing to something better. I don't know what it looks like. So I'm saying there are different ways. And, and I want the audience to know also that, don't feel badly if you don't know today what that future self will be, because the more you take care of you, that's actually going to inform you in, okay, well, what do I want? What do I love? What am I attracted to? And that helps us create that future self.
Yeah. So the way I kind of make it to people, right? It's like when people say they're lost. So I always do something that's metaphoric that they can actually understand. So it's kind of like when they're driving and they're lost. Like, what do you do when you're lost? Do you put it in park? Because that's what you're doing. It's weird. You just kind of went, I'm lost. My question first is, where are you going? If you don't know that, you're always going to be lost. And that's what I mean. Like, if you don't know where you're trying to head, it's like, doesn't matter where you are in the present. You're just driving and going like, I don't know, but I'm driving. Like, you have to figure that out first. I'm telling you, you're not going to go in the right direction.
I 100% agree with you that if you're going somewhere, but when we're depressed or we're having a panic attack, we're going nowhere.
Yeah.
We need to just stay put.
Yeah, but the depression, see, to me, depression is just the result. It's not the cause. Depression is just the result. It's just the same thing with anxiety, same thing with anger, same thing with happiness. No one goes around going like, holy shit, I have happiness right now. Like, whoa, no one ever talks about the other side. I've been dealing with depression for 20 years. No way, I've been dealing with happiness for 20. No shit. Like, so you're telling me I've never been depressed, I've never been angry, but everyone just talks about depression and anxiety as if they're the only emotions that just kind of happen.
But we're talking about mental health challenges. So those, so 100% there's happiness too. But when we're in those episodes, we're not seeing.
Right, but they're the results, no matter what.
Yes, but I think we both know telling somebody to be happy when they're depressed.
Oh, I'm not saying happy. What I'm saying is that's just the result. Don't think, I have depression. When you say that, you have depression, and that's the cause why I'm depressed. That's now you need pills. Here you go. And that's how they get you.
That's not very forgiving.
Okay. You remember how you said like, people are reliant on medical
because they don't know. But I do
because
believe
they think depression is the problem.
I believe in having a more compassionate. I think that there is a lot of value in being in the present. And again, it's not about saying I'm depressed and I'm going to let myself slip and watch it happen and let it happen.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying
no.
it does happen on a physiological basis.
Yeah.
And that's where we have to not worry about the future self in that moment. In that moment, when you feel an episode coming on, that's where you have to say, what do I need to take care of? And so going back to mindfulness, it's about noticing, like, okay, I'm having this emotion and not judging it. It's saying it's here and I'm not happy. And happy is not always good, because there's so many times where we will just cover over bad feelings and see the silver lining, like, oh, but there's a gift in this. That's not good either. You have to feel those unpleasant emotions.
Oh, totally. Embrace it.
That's about being human. So mindfulness, when it comes to mental health, is about saying, right now, I'm not thinking about future me. Right now, I'm not thinking about the things I need to do, my responsibilities. Right now, my only responsibility is taking care of my mind, my body, and my spirit. And really being fully in that. And that creates a self-love. It creates a different way of seeing ourselves. So there is a new perspective that we're looking at. And that is, I matter, and how I'm feeling matters.
Yeah.
And it's up to me to take care of it.
Yeah.
So that's the perspective shift.
Yeah, I'm totally down with self-awareness. Like, I think it's very important. A lot of people, it's the same, again, if we go back to the metaphor of startups and stuff, that's why people look at their financial statements. It's the story of what's happening. Where are we at right now? What are we doing right now? If that's like, if you didn't look at what's happening now, then, well, how are you going to know where you're going to get? But when I was talking about, the driving part, and that's where I kind of talk about the purpose thing. Unless you know where you're going, it's really difficult to get out of feeling lost. Like, you're never going to, if you just place it in park and hope, like, well, I guess I'll find my way. And as long as I know where I'm at right now, and I'm going to be fine. But it's like, you really have to figure out where you're trying to go. But I know that you're lost and you're bugging out and stuff. So, but that's kind of at least for me, it's difficult. I know it's a great remedy, because it's kind of like yoga, meditation. I get it. They are good for you. I agree 100%. I don't not agree that it doesn't help you. But if you don't look at the cause, if you're always remedying the result, and you don't look at the cause of it, you're going to have to do yoga every single freaking hour. You're going to have to meditate every single. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, until you look at the cause, because a lot of times it's.
Well, there is a physiological component, and there's also the perspective, the mindset component.
Yeah.
So yes, that's something that we can do to help the mindset component. Yeah. But the physiological component, if it's a matter of chemical imbalances, it's still going to happen. And so it's about understand. I know we come from very different schools of thought. So let me finish.
Also, that's why I like doing this, and I totally agree.
So what I'd like to finish is that when that component is coming up, no amount of mindset work is going to help until you take care of yourself. And sometimes it does mean doing yoga every hour. I'm not against that. I think go ahead. If you feel good doing yoga every hour, by all means do it. And I'm very much for not making people wrong for doing it the way that they're doing it. I totally get what you're saying about looking at the cause and like, okay, so what is it that, caused my depression? I know where my depression started. It doesn't change it from happening today. I'm living an extremely healthy life, physically, emotionally, spiritually, every which way possible. And I still have times where I notice, my anxiety showing up. We're in a pandemic right now. Doesn't matter how good my mindset is, the pandemic is still going to trigger my anxiety. Yeah. And many other people's isolation. Again, doesn't matter how great my mindset is, I'm still going to feel it. So we have to look at the reality that life is not, and there's so much unknown, and it's completely valid. Like those reasons are valid. Totally. And during those times, like right now, we're 6 months in with no end in sight. Yeah. So we have to look at that and say, okay, you know what? That's a great reason for being depressed. And it doesn't matter what my future self is like. Right now, I need to get through today and figure out, there are job losses, there are people dying, but there's all sorts of stuff going on. And we can't just skim over it and say, well, this is just my perspective. Like,
Yeah.
no, there's actually physiological things that are happening too right now in our brains with this unknown. Like, as humans, our brains are designed to help us find safety. And during a pandemic, we can't find safety because nobody on this earth knows what's going on.
Yeah.
So our brains are constantly searching for it. So while we're in this triggered state of fight, flight, freeze, we're basically in survival mode. That's going to kickstart anybody's depression, anxiety, any other kind of challenges that they might have to their mental health. Right. It's going to make it worse because we're not feeling safe.
Right.
And so that's where mindfulness again comes in. It doesn't matter what the mindset is. If your brain doesn't believe you're safe, it's not telling your body you're safe. And there's a loop, like the mind-body connection. So you're not going to get to that place without mindfulness, without really getting your brain and your whole nervous system into a safe place.
So, there's three things that I'm looking at, right? So one, the only thing that causes you to stress in the pandemic and stuff like that is because you don't know what the hell the future is going to be. That's what causes stress, because the future. You have this different path perspective of the future, and that's what fucks you up. And another thing is, when you mentioned the pandemic, this, that, so nouns are never a cause in anything. A cause is always a verb. Same thing with your purpose. It always has to be a verb. It can't be a noun. I want to be the best lawyer. That's not a purpose at all. Never going to be, because it's very finite. So cause is always a verb. Something is happening. You can't say my dad. Because I lost my husband. That's not a cause.
But if lost is a verb.
Right, but
I'm not sure I'm following.
The loss is not the cause. It's how you're perceiving the loss, because there's a lot of people that's lost their husband and they're completely fine, right? Mm-hmm. And not that they're always fine. It's not bad to miss someone. That's like you're supposed to, or else you didn't love them. It's just proof that you love the person. That's all that is. Okay. And you're supposed to go through that. And if you didn't, there wouldn't be life, because then you don't really care about anything else. So really, it's just your perspectives that's shifting every time. When you start stressing out, when you get anxiety, like for example, when I say cause, someone kind of challenged me with this. I was like, I take pills for anxiety. I'm like, all right, cool. So tell me an example. When are you anxious? And he's just like, when I'm in a car. That is not a cause. A lot of people drive, he says when I'm driving in a car or whatever. Or when is his car? And I'm just like, all right, so a lot of people drive. What makes you anxious, though? Mm-hmm. And then he said, I don't know, like when I'm driving or whatever, I just, I feel like I'm gonna get in an accident and maybe, die basically, right? And I'm just like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So your perspective is that whenever you're in a car and driving, you're going to get in an accident and you might die. Anyone with that perspective is gonna have anxiety. That is what's making you anxious. It's not I have anxiety. Well, now I'm gonna think I'm gonna die in a freaking car. Now I'm anxious. That's not how it works. It's the other way. My perspective is this. It's causing me to be anxious. Well, now you have anxiety. You don't have anxiety, and then you become anxious.
So what's the verb that you were referring to that you were saying that's what causes it?
It's because he's thinking, so it's some verb. He's thinking he's going to get into an accident. That's what's happening. It's not the car. It's never a noun. A cause is always a verb, always.
So what's the verb in that scenario?
I'm thinking I'm going to get in a car accident.
We could think anything. We can.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. But that's the cause. If you got rid of that.
Well, okay. So, all right.
If you got rid of that.
I hear what you're saying, but I don't.
Well, basically, this guy goes to me like, fuck, I'm trying to look for an excuse, but you're right.
I know. I hear what you're saying, because I can find the verb too, like losing my husband. Losing is the verb, so like. Yeah, well, it's not the losing,
right. Because it's already lost. Everything that happened in the past is in the past. You're kicking your own ass. Yeah. No one's doing it to you. No one, that's it. No verb, no nothing is happening. The only verb happening is from you. You keep thinking of the love.
Essentially, thinking is always the verb.
Yeah, so I guess pretty much.
Whatever we're thinking.
So, yeah, something.
I think that's the verb. Is like, it's not so much that you're thinking, because we're always thinking. It's what are you thinking?
And the mental health. Yeah, in the mental health, but in any like anything, the cause has to always be, there's some kind of verb.
The verb is generally I'm thinking.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't just say like world problems. Oh, it's pollution. It's racism. Racism is not the problem.
So with the pandemic, going back to the pandemic, it's, people have lost their jobs. People are dying. There's two verbs right there. There's 100%, there's a million reasons. So it is the pandemic as a whole, but all the verbs are dying, being sick, losing
But that's always
jobs.
happening. People dying and stuff, but it's your perspective.
Like whether or not we believe
it's really like what's happening. What are we doing?
I think discounting people's fears makes mental health challenges worse. I think we have to find compassion and see where, and not making people wrong for believing. Because yes, if I, so going back to my episodes of depression, if I just believe like, okay, I'm depressed and there's nothing I can do about it and I'm helpless, yes, I'm thinking that, and that will make it worse. If I think though that, okay, you know what, this is happening and I can take care of myself, it will make it better. But the whole idea of having compassion and not making ourselves or anyone else wrong for what they're experiencing. So they might have a thought that is not serving them 100%.
Yeah.
But we can't make them wrong for having that thought.
It's not wrong. It's just a perspective. It's just pure perspective. That's all it is.
Yeah.
That's all you're teaching people. Even with mindfulness, with this, it's really, you're telling them like, you really need to think this way. And that's it. The situation didn't change. But the pandemic is still there. The pandemic is still there. Like, it's still going to be, you still don't know the future. You still don't know nothing. But now you go, like, all right, the pandemic's happening. What can I do?
Physiologically, we're not wired. That's rationalized. That's actually being very much in our heads of like, there's nothing you can do. You can't rationalize away the survival instinct of humankind. That hold on, let me finish. We're wired from day one of humankind to avoid harm and hunt for food. So the avoiding harm is the way our brain is wired. It doesn't matter. You can think however you want to think. Your body and your brain, like during a time like this, are like, your thoughts are bullshit. Because at the end of the day, I might die.
Right, because of your perspective.
No.
No,
it's physiological.
No, so what happens is, Lisa Rankin wrote Mind Over Medicine. And that's what I was actually going to bring up earlier when you said, like, physiologically, how it affects you and stuff. But the thing is, the physiological thing of result or the cause. When you think perspective-wise, so we're built in. The amygdala doesn't fucking know what a lion is or I can't pay my bills tomorrow is. It doesn't know. It just knows panic, cortisol, bust it out, boom. And then all the negative chemicals start happening out. That's where you get those chemical imbalances by simply changing your perspective. Simply changing your perspective. It's the same exact situation. I got in a car accident or whatever. Our problem is it keeps going from there rather than like, oh, I'm safe, I'm good. Cortisol should go down. It doesn't. It keeps on pumping because, oh man, now I'm going to be late. Oh man, now the insurance, how am I going to pay for this and this? And then the cortisol just keeps pumping. Oh, I'm good. So it's like, it's really your perspective and the way you think is what's producing the cortisol level. So she actually studied, how it actually affects your body. People are getting sick simply because of their mindset. That's it. And that's physiological. That's how people talk about the placebo effect, about how you can, cure cancer. So people have freaking grown hair. Like, she studied all of this and what is causing all this. So she was a doctor. So she was very like science. She didn't believe in that stuff, mind over matter thing. Like, she just researched the hell out of it. She's like, what the hell is happening? And so she kept looking and looking. So there was people with these symptoms or issues with them. the result was there, right? So she's going, what the hell is happening? I can't seem to diagnose them. So she started a different approach, started asking them, like, what do you think your body needs to heal? What do you think this and this? She thought they were going to go like, oh, I need more pills. I need more this. And then what she learned was, I need to leave my husband or I have to get another job.
Yeah. So I mean, I could see outside of like a situation like the pandemic that holding some weight, but the pandemic, I don't think I'm going to get sick personally, but I'm fearful for the world. I'm watching, people are dying.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what my perspective is, like, I'm okay. I'm doing fine. But my brain is still on overload because it is trying to make sure, because I'm watching what's happening in the world. So unless you are, off the grid and not watching it, it's reality. It doesn't matter what the perspective
your reality is just your perspective. That's all it is.
All right. It is. I think it's semantics, but yes.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, because that's where I always come from. There was this one girl, right?
So it's hard to say when hundreds of thousands of people are dying. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody can have a positive perspective on that. It's the reality. People are dying, and that's a terrible thing. Terrible. I don't think we can see that as a good thing. So I think, yes, my thought is, that's a perspective I have, and that's the reality. But I don't think, we're going to argue on. But
how is it affecting you directly right now? That's why
because I'm looking at how it's impacting the entire world, and what's happening in the world impacts me.
Totally,
because I'm a human being, and I'm a member of the human society.
Yeah,
so every single death matters.
Yeah,
100%.
And that'll definitely freak you out. Definitely. And there are people that are kind of like, well, there's really nothing I can do about it. What can I do for me right now? What can I do to make the world better right now?
Right. So I'm doing both, and so so here's the thing. So I think this is the difference. I hold space for both. Yes, I am doing things in the world. I am showing up every day and doing this work in this mental health field, which is particularly challenging right now. And I hold space and have compassion for myself and everybody else who is in a place where we need more compassion, where our brains and our bodies are on overload, where we are not from a physiological perspective able, if you're aware of what's happening in the world, it's nearly impossible to be working at our peak, because our brains and our bodies are in fear every time we walk out our door. So I think that's the thing. It's allowing for both. Right. And that's the work that I do, is saying, like, okay, just, yes, maybe it's a shift in perspective, and maybe I don't need to shift that perspective. I'm allowing for both of them. Yeah, it's not that. But what I'm saying is, the fear is a result. Fear doesn't go fear, and now I'm afraid. It's I'm thinking this, that's why I'm afraid. If you knew a tiger, a lion was behind a glass, and lion, nothing. No fear, no fight or flight, nothing. Take that window away. I don't know. Not everybody would agree with that. Now you might get hurt. The only way you'll still have issues if the window was there. What's your perspective? Your perspective is it might take it down. Some future that might not even happen. That's your perspective. That's where fear comes from. Fear is built. I think sometimes the perspectives are healthy to have too. I think that if we are going to a place of like, oh, it's fine and everything's fine, that's not healthy either. No. So totally I think that we have to be, there's an importance of being grounded in reality. Definitely. And from that place, and evaluating from there. Yeah. And, and I think that's the important piece, that we can't always just wish it away, change our perspective. It's not wishing it away. It's like the pandemic. You can't do anything about it. But if you focus on that, you're going to have a hard time. Like you're going to have and that's the thing. That's all or nothing thinking. That, if we focus on, we don't have to, even if we're not focused on it, it's happening. It's happening right, everywhere. It's, it's all over. We're going outside, people are wearing masks. We're limited to different extents on what we can do. There's concerns. Like my son came home from university yesterday, and it's like, oh, should we have had you tested? Should we be concerned about who you're exposed? Should you be seeing your grandmother?
Right.
So that's not fearful, that's being responsible. And at the same time, of course, there's fear there of like, yeah, what if you're carrying it, you're asymptomatic, and you go to your grandmother and she gets sick?
Mm-hmm.
So I can't go to the place of like, no, everybody will be fine and you can go see her. Like, it's not
at all. I'm just saying,
yeah.
talking about your mindset on things, period.
Yeah.
I'm not saying about the actions that you do.
Right.
But when you
but
talk
I don't
about
think we have one mindset about everything.
You can have different purposes, different perspectives. There's so many different angles in this, but I do know that it always stems from there. Always. It always does. Always. It doesn't go.
And sometimes that serves us. That's all I'm saying. Is that it can and right. So that's the thing. I think that we when we go into judgment, we're not serving anybody.
Judgment. I'm not saying judgment. Yeah. I'm just talking about your perspective on your situation. So one of the things I tell people when I talk about perspective, right? I was snowboarding in the trees, in the mountains or whatever, right? And there's these trees. They're like 10 feet apart. And when I would go down there, I would go 1, 2, 3. And then all of a sudden, almost hit a tree. And I'm like, fuck. And then I try it again. I get up, like takes so long because it's like so deep in there. Mm-hmm. And I get up again and I go 1, 2, 3, tree. Damn, what the fuck? I can't do this. My friends, on the other hand, are just going through this thing like it's nothing. And I'm going, what the hell? He finally stops, sprays me off, beforehand. And he's just like, hey. And then I told, he's like, are you okay? And I go, yeah. But dude, how the hell do you do that? Like, you guys are just like cruising like it's nothing and going crazy here. And he goes, dude, stop looking at the trees. Look at the path between the trees. And I was like, right. It wasn't the 15 years of Oregon trails when you were snowboarding, right? Nothing like that? All right, cool. But I had nothing to lose. So I get up and he said, all right, don't look at the trees. Look at the path between the trees. Yeah. I get up and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Finally stop, and I'm going, whoa, what happened there? I didn't get better in 0.5 seconds. Right. The weather didn't change, and the trees sure as hell didn't move. How the hell did I do it? All I did was change my perspective. The situation is exactly the same.
Yes.
The trees are there.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about mental health, it's it does. Sometimes we can't get there right away, and that's
unless you change your perspective on things.
No, that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we can't get to that place.
Right. That's why we coach them to get there, because that's what you're trying to do. Your mission is to.
I actually don't coach them to get there. I don't want
I want them to.
Right. So again, So I don't coach them to change their perspective on their mental health. The way I coach them is to have compassion for where they are. So what mindfulness is say with emotions, whether we're feeling fear, whether we're feeling sadness, mindfulness is not about changing it. Mindfulness is about receiving it as information, having compassion, applying compassion, and applying curiosity. It's not saying you better change your perspective. It's about saying, you know what, that's not what I know that's not what you're saying. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so your clients will go to you, my clients will come to me. But again, going back to mindfulness is about saying and getting curious of maybe this does serve me. You know what? Sometimes fear serves us. And we don't have to change it. That is a perspective, but it's the idea about sometimes we don't have to change things.
It's not have to.
Sometimes things can be the way they are.
No,
right. So I'm talking in the context of mindfulness, because that's what you invited me here to talk about. Yeah.
What you're doing right now with mindfulness, when you tell people about mindfulness, is you're changing their perspective on their feelings, on their things. Not that you have to change your perspective. You're just kind of doing that, and they're naturally changing their perspective, and going like, oh, I have to be more aware. Because a lot of them are going, oh my God, fear and this and that. But you're teaching them to change their perspective on fear. Right. Change their perspective on their feelings. That's what I mean.
But I'm not telling them not to feel fear.
That's what I'm mean. You're changing their perspective on fear, is what I'm saying. I didn't say get rid of it.
Right. So you were talking about the verbs and the stories around the fear. I'm just talking about the emotion itself. And
Yeah,
if
the
those are
emotion
the
itself
stories,
is
that's
the result.
fine. Yeah.
The emotion itself is a result. Unless you change the way they think about that, they're
Right.
gonna have,
So
unless you change something, it's always going to be the same, right? It's always
right.
going to be the same.
So that's the thing that I guess I believe in, you know, people will change when they're ready to change.
Oh, I agree with that.
And sometimes though, and I think it's also about not, like, I know for me, I've made myself wrong for a lot of things. And in my healing and my work, I realized, you know what, I don't have to change my perspective on things. Some of these things actually serve me, and they have served me.
Yeah.
And so it's that acceptance. It's about, you know what, maybe you don't need to change that. You get to decide. And that, no, but this is the thing, that it's about letting the person make the choice for themselves. Like, you know, we're talking about perspectives and being at choice. Well, you get to choose if you want to be fearful. If, you know, if fear serves you, like, let's go back to the pandemic right now. If that helps you get stuff done, if that helps you get through your day, by all means, feel whatever fear. And yes, that's a perspective, but again, it's doesn't have to be a bad thing. Things don't have to change.
It's never a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's where the cause is. That's it. It's not a bad, good, this, that. It's like, it's just a perspective. But for you
and there's physiological. So I think it's both. It's a mix of both.
Right. It's always both. Just like when you're out of shape, you more depressed. And if you work out, you get in better shape. And it's like, and it's a cycle thing. You have to stop it. And I get that. But
right. So why do you have to stop it?
I'm not stopping it. Well, if
you just said you have to stop
it. If you're obese and depressed, you have to stop that cycle. You have to stop.
But that's the thing. You can't always stop the cycles. If it's a chemical imbalance, and that's the thing, that the cycle will happen. It's how are you choosing to be in the cycle? And that's where I think you and I are not fully aligned. I don't feel it has to be stopped. You said stopped. You said we have to stop the cycle.
Everyone knows when you keep eating a lot and obese, you get more depressed. And then because you're depressed, you get more obese. And then when you're obese, you get even more depressed. And everyone knows
that's a different type though. But if
you're, then you're telling me don't stop it. I'm like, well,
but I'm not obese and I experience depression. So there's other stuff going on.
I'm talking about, that was just an example. But the depression, see, I think you can always go back to using the result as the cause. And that's
I see it, there's a chemical component that's sometimes not being addressed.
Not everyone is like that. You're another assumption. That's what everyone goes through. Because a lot of times,
so there is like, if it's a situational depression, then it could be a perspective, yes.
Right.
But overall, when we're talking about, say, bipolar disorder, which, you know, what my husband,
I'm not dealing with, but I'm not talking about bipolar. I'm not here to tell bipolar.
There's depression there.
Yeah, but that's assuming everyone's bipolar.
No, I'm talking about depression. So if bipolar is chemical and depression is also chemical, then we are looking at them the same way. Essentially, they're both mental illnesses.
Yeah. But can you make yourself depressed by simply thinking of things? Can you make yourself sick by simply thinking of things? That's way more than chemical. I mean, I'm talking physical changes. You can really have illnesses and all these things. So it goes both ways. It's not just physical, and then now my mental.
So I acknowledge both sides of the mental illnesses, and you know, and that's the thing, that somebody can say they're depressed, and you and I don't know how much of it is chemical and how much is not, and so we need to have that compassion and help people be in the moment and not necessarily change their perspectives, because they could have the best perspective in the world. And listen, my perspective when I have a depressive episode, I'm not going into negative thinking. I don't. That's just not how it shows up for me. So, you know, looking at it from a small window of, you know, you're seeing things from a negative viewpoint, and that's why you are depressed, is not serving the majority of the population of people who have depression, because it does show up and manifest in different ways. And so really, you know, it's about honoring, how does it show up for you, and how do you, in your inner wisdom, know what you need and to decide, and being present through mindfulness helps us recognize, what do I need in this moment? And sometimes maybe it's more medication. So we can't just look at that one component of mindset, because that's only one small component. For me, I can have the best mindset in the world. My depressive episode is still going to come up. I'm still going to be physically exhausted, and I'm going to be kind of apathetic. I won't feel anything. So how would mindset help that?
Well, see, and that's the thing. See, this is where I come in. It's like, that's natural. For you to never feel like you're never going to be depressed ever again.
So how would mindset help me in my personal episodes?
Because to me, it's because whenever anything like that happens, you cannot be depressed and have a great different perspective. Like it's impossible to be happy.
So specifically, like if physiologically I'm exhausted and I just want to sleep, but otherwise I'm pretty okay. I'm just physically tired, and maybe I'm just not feeling anything. How does a shift in perspective serve me?
So, I mean, now we're talking about you're just tired.
Right. And that's my depression. That's how my depression looks.
So I was trying to look for the cause. What's causing it? Let's see what's causing it, because it didn't just, I have depression. That ain't it. I'm telling you, that's not, I have depression. Because if you think everyone's like that, we're in big trouble. Something typically causes it, right? Almost always, whether it's physical or not. Let's find that out. But is it physical? I don't know, because it goes both ways.
But it's not. There may be something that triggers it, but not always.
The thing is, so to me, it's like, what's the harm in thinking you can?
Yeah.
Like, what's the harm in thinking that, hey, it might not be a chemical imbalance. It might just be
making ourselves wrong. That's where I see the issue.
Because it's hard to have a perspective in a good way and still be depressed.
Because then we're going to the space of, I need to have a better perspective. Personally, when I am tired, when I'm just, not feeling, I believe that's a chemical thing, because, hey, I'm a coach. And I have a coach, and I actually work with 4 coaches who are accountability partners.
Yeah.
I have a great perspective on life. But
you're allowed to be tired. I don't see why that's not a bad thing. I mean, why that's a bad thing. I never see anxiety as abnormal. It's because it's always being caused by something. You're anxious because of this. You're anxious because of this. Something is happening. It doesn't just go.
Sometimes the body. So again, this is actually like a physiological thing, that your body can react to something that is not from a cause, that's not caused by a thought. So your body might be feeling it. There's nothing that our mind can fix in that.
Our mind is cancer, and there's proof of this. And our mind has fixed physical ailments.
I think we should just leave it at.
But you know what I mean? And that's all I'm trying to say. That for people, when people are going beyond, I'm talking chemical imbalance, cortisol, and endorphins, and all that stuff. That's just a battle between those things. So what's causing that? So to me, I always want to find out what's causing that. Is it your diet? Is it your sleep pattern? Is it this? So there's usually different causes, which is not just.
I sleep between 8 and 9 hours a night. I drink green juices and smoothies. I eat a very healthy diet. There's more to it, and I appreciate you giving me.
I don't think there's none of it. I'm saying,
I think
everyone is like that.
We've reached a point where we need to agree that we disagree on this, and I totally thank you for having me on the show. And it's been a great,
kind of got caught up
exchange, but. Yeah, I have a very different mindset than you on that, and I respect where you're coming from, and I respect the work that you're doing, and this is why we have different voices, and I think I think.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always curious. I don't think everything I know is right or anything. It's just like, I just kind of question. It's not like, oh, it's definitely this way. Because that's one thing, the biggest thing that I get is that the whole chemical imbalance. But when I read, Mind Over Medicine and stuff like that, and I'm going, yeah, but she's saying
that's one component.
That's what I mean. So I'm kind of going like,
not always, but that's the thing, that if we're just targeting that, so essentially,
no, I'm not targeting it. It's one of the things. Hear
me out for a moment. So when we're strictly going to just, you need to shift your perspective, it's just as bad as saying you just need to take these pills. It's not just one route. It's all encompassing. And at the end of the day, it's, the individual who's experiencing it knows themselves, just let me finish, knows themselves best and knows what works for them. And we need to honor that. And we can't tell them this is what's going to work better. I
never said tell them that.
I'm not accusing you of anything.
I think that's where the confusion is.
We can't just look at one route. I think it's looking at every component. And sometimes when we look too much at one, we forget about that other piece of it. And it's important to hold both. It's really about it. It's a yes and.
Yeah,
it's both. It's and honoring both.
No, I agree. All of it matter. All of it works. Like I said, it's not. I'm not against you doing yoga. I'm not against. Like, it helps. Like, obviously, it freaking helps. It's not a bad thing at all. I just kind of look at the cause and make sure. And I'm not telling people like, yo, you better change your perspective. What I'm doing is, I have to do everything I can, whether it's yoga, whether it's teaching them about mindfulness and this and that, so that their perspective will shift. I'm not telling them like, you better shift your perspective. I just know until that perspective shifts, it's very difficult to make decisions according to that perspective. That's what I mean. It's not that I have to force him to that perspective. I don't know what his perspective is right now, but I'm going to figure it out. But when I start finding out,
you want them to have.
What's that?
What's the perspective you're hoping they'll have?
It depends. What's their purpose? What's the purpose?
Yeah.
If your purpose is to be, I don't know, I guess there's so many different purposes for everything, whether it's becoming a parent, does everything is, for example, like, I don't know, I want to be a doctor or whatever. Or actually, that's not a purpose, it has to be a cause. I want to help people more by helping them go through, like, basically becoming a life coach, right? But you can't say my purpose is to become a life coach, because that's not a purpose. The purpose.
So how does that help in mental health, though?
Because without a purpose, it's so difficult to shift your perspective according to it. Without a purpose, it's very difficult.
If I came to you and I said, I'm having an episode right now, would you try to connect me back to my purpose?
Well, see, that's the result. So that's like the Band-Aid, but I'm talking about like getting rid of this.
I have a purpose and I still have depression.
Yeah.
So, and I still have anxiety. And I know many people.
Yeah, your perspective shifts all the time. And for you never to be anxious again, it's like, that's abnormal if you think you're never going to get anxiety again or depression again. That's abnormal. It's okay to have depressive states. Like, it's the result. I don't know what you're going through at the time, whatever it is, whether, like you said, chemical imbalance or whatever, but something is causing that, right? It's not just like depression and now I'm depressed. That's not how it never works really that way. Like, I think you're equaling depression and chemical imbalance in one. I'm like, no, chemical imbalance might be causing the depression, and maybe that's the cause, but I have to look at like, all right, well, it doesn't just go, I have depression and I have depression forever. And it's just like, no.
So talking about, so you're saying the chemical imbalance is the cause, and then how do you?
Well, the thing is, what I'm saying is not everyone.
Well, no. So how are you shifting it then?
You can change your chemical imbalance all day long by changing your perspectives. For example, someone going through a breakup.
Okay, so that's where I don't agree that chemical imbalances are.
For example, like someone going through a breakup, right? The perspective is, I'll never find someone else. Whatever it is about the breakup, and then. But
in the logical mind, and that's, there's so much more to it that's not being addressed in this conversation, because we can't logically solve mental health issues.
It's not logic.
But it is logic, because sure it
No,
is.
it's not logic. That's why we said, that's why we want teal. That's why we want all of these things help. And in the mental health aspect, like, I'm not saying, it's almost like you think it's my only thing is perspective, but I just say, like, until that changes, it's very difficult when it's because that's kind of like where everything stems from.
So the perspective that I hold is that we don't need to.
Not one perspective. There's different perspectives. Like, it's not just one, and that's your life perspective. It depends on your perspective on a situation, on life.
So I'm talking about mental illness and my perspective on that.
Okay.
And I don't see it that it's a thought that causes it necessarily. It might be a thought that is exacerbated or might exacerbate. Because yes, if I'm having say if I'm depressed and then I start thinking thoughts that are negative, I mean, that doesn't happen to me, but if one would, then yes, that might make their episode worse, but I don't think that's the cause of it. I don't think them thinking a negative thought made them depressed. That's where I differ. I think that there's more going on that we need to look at than just, that was caused by your breakup.
So,
it might not be.
How do people get out of it then?
Well, how do they get out of what?
Well, because all we keep talking about is how they're never getting out of it. And I'm trying to say, no, there's possibility in their perspective.
What is it that you're asking me? You're saying get out of it. So what is it?
Depression, because it's like someone's talking about, and I get that it doesn't just come from the thought and this and that. So what do you think?
So depression as an illness or a depressive episode?
Well, I guess my point is that it all boils down to they need medicine.
You asked a question, I'm trying to answer it, but I'm trying to understand it. So you said, how do we get out of it?
No, what I mean is if depression, right, it's a chemical imbalance and there's nothing we can do about it, it's not your thoughts. So what are we doing for people then?
So that is
not medicine.
Right. So are we talking about the actual episode, or are we talking about?
No, you said the chemical imbalances. It's kind of, you just kind of get depressed and all that stuff. Okay, if that's the cause, the only remedy would be medicine. Well, it's not thoughts, it's not perspective, it's not. So what would you have? What are we doing for them then that would get them out of depression beyond medicine then? Like, if it's only medicine that can actually solve it, then what are we doing then? Do you know what I mean? That's what I have to figure out, because things have to be consistent.
No, I don't, because you started asking a question and then you were telling me. I don't know if that was a question or a statement.
No, like if it's coming from chemical imbalance, and that's why people are depressed, and thoughts don't do it, their perspectives don't do it, then what are we doing that'll change the chemical imbalance? Basically, you're saying there's nothing you can do about it.
So I'm saying we don't have a cure for mental illness yet. And
so what are we doing?
You want me to answer? I would love to tell you.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, we are helping people empower themselves in ways that feel right for them. And if it's medication that they need and whatever other resources, but it's not just a one solution. It's not just a perspective.
Yeah. So basically, they're just depressed forever.
We'd have a cure. We don't. You and I have different ways.
People have come out of depression. How? And that's what I mean.
All right.
If it's not medicine, then how did they get out of depression? If it's chemical imbalance. I don't think you
want me to actually answer any of these questions because you're not giving me the space to answer.
What do you mean? I just did. You know what I mean? Because, for example,
you talked over me, but I appreciate it.
I know we kept going 15 more minutes. No, but I'm curious.
No, thank you. Yeah. I think I'm going to leave it to you to find that answer on your own.
All right.
Give it to
Thank you so much for.
Thank you. This has been a fun conversation.
Coming on the show. I mean, we went way over like an hour. So,
we did.
Thank you for talking and explaining your side and stuff like that. I just get really curious about how the mind works and all that stuff. So, but thank you so much. So everyone that listen to her, everyone that listened to her and everything that she said, all this is going to be meaningless and useless unless you actually make a decision about something. So whether it's reaching out to her to talk to her a little bit more, basically implementing all the stuff that she said, unless you actually make the decision to implement that, everything you learn is completely useless. So make sure you make a decision to do something about that. And all right, so thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you. It was a pleasure getting to know you, and thank you for having me on your show. This was definitely a lively conversation.
I didn't think it's going this way at all. The two smiliest people I've seen on my thing ever. And we're the ones that actually went like that. So funny. But thank you again. Right. Thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate it.
Bye.
All right, bye.